everybody to our webinar today on intercultural communication skills. I'm sure you guys are from all over the place, but here in Edmonton, it's a pretty blustery winter wonderland day. So let's jump in and hopefully we'll distract you from the cold for a little bit. We are going to start with a land acknowledgement. Here in Edmonton, we are on Treaty 6 territory land. We acknowledge that the land on which we gather in Treaty 6 territory is the traditional gathering place for many Indigenous people. We honor and respect the history, languages, ceremonies, and culture of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who call this territory home. The First Peoples' connection to the land teaches us about our inherent responsibility to protect and respect Mother Earth. With this acknowledgement, we honor the ancestors and children who have been buried here, missing and murdered Indigenous women and children, and the process of ongoing collective healing for all human beings. We are reminded that we are all treaty people and of the responsibility we have to one another. And with that, I would like to introduce our speaker for today, Deborah Lewinsky. I have a little biography for her that I'm going to read off to introduce her. Deborah is a native Albertan and a University of Alberta graduate who taught in the public education system for many years before taking the opportunity to work overseas. Deborah worked in Chad, Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea in West Africa, Mozambique in East Africa, and Iraq in the Middle East. She is an experienced instructional designer, operations entry-level foundational trainer, and English language coordinator and instructor. Skilled in cultural competency and curriculum, she has taken all her skills and worked successfully in the oil and gas industry. Deborah is currently teaching in the Department of Continuing Education International at MacEwan University in Edmonton. There she continues to work with international students and teach intercultural communication skills and Canadian workplace culture, a program she developed. She has also taught literacy to newcomers in Canada. So we would like to give a warm welcome to Deborah, who is going to take it away.
Thank you very much, Mackenzie and Olga. And I hope everybody is staying warm on this beautiful blustery winter day. All right, let's get started. This webinar is called Intercultural Communication Skills, and we are going to really focus in on what that means in terms of Canada. So I thought that I would like to start just by giving us some information to think about. Canada is one of the most multicultural countries in the world. We have different backgrounds, experiences, and cultures, and we interact daily to connect us with new perspectives. So by interacting and meeting all of these new people, we are becoming rich and we are learning from that. The diversity of these cultures envelops our lives in our workplace, our daily routines, and in our communities. And Canada is such a multicultural country that I thought that I would just give you some information, some facts, and this is from first quarter of this year. Canada is about 38 million people, and the ethnic origins of people in Canada, as you can see, is about almost 73% is European. And then if you just look at the numbers, Asian is next with 17.7, the Indigenous, African, Latin American, and then the Ocean. And the Ocean, that is around Papua New Guinea, the area that is around Australia, so the islands there. And I wanted to start by giving this information just so that we can make reference and we can acknowledge the diversity of Canada, especially as we move forward and we start talking about some of the models of culture. And we can always refer back to know that of the diversity of Canada. All right, our objectives today for this next hour, we're going to start by defining what does it mean to be culturally, a cultural competence. We're going to explore two models of culture, and then we're going to discuss the impact of intercultural communications. We're going to explore the factors that may contribute to misunderstandings in our daily routines. And then the last, we're going to talk about some strategies to bridge the gap to cultural understanding. And with this, the makeup of Canada, with this diversity that we have, because each person has their own set of values and their own set of beliefs, that sometimes we can have, we have some misunderstandings, that can happen. We can have judgment, we can have prejudices, we can have biases. So with all of this in mind, the goal, and we're going to talk about this in more depth, the goal is to become more culturally competent, to understand that with knowledge and discernment, one can move from judging to understanding. And so cultural competence, to begin with, to take a look from this judging, cultural competence, it can impact our intercultural communication. So how culturally competent we are in terms of the understanding of others around us, other cultures, it's going to have an impact on how we communicate, on how perhaps misunderstandings, where our biases come in, where prejudices come in. And all of these have an impact on our day-to-day. So the key here is to become culturally competent. And with cultural competence, one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to talk about culture. What is culture? And with culture, when we understand culture, that is going to help us to become culturally competent. And so we're going to do that by taking a look at two different models. The first one is the Iceberg Model of culture, and then we're going to follow that up with the Lewis model. So we can talk about what is culture. Culture, according to Edward T. Hall, he described culture using the analogy of the iceberg, and it's called the Iceberg Model. And he said that culture is much like an iceberg. So if we look at an iceberg, we see about 10% of the iceberg is above water, and about 90% of it is below the water. And Hall went on to say that the 10% that we see, a lot of times that's the part that people will react to. And we're going to get into that a little bit more depth. And 90% of it, those are the beliefs and the values. Those are those qualities that are embedded within us. So with the iceberg model, it's above the waterline. That's about 10% of the iceberg. These are the aspects of culture. These are the things that we can see. They're explicit, they're visible. Those are the things that are taught. It involves the five senses. The emotional level is whole. I always say that this is the 10% that if we go on a holiday, we go to a different country, these are the 10% that we're going to see. We're going to see the different dress, the smells, the architecture, the food, the religious, the customs. We can see part of the religion, but religion also goes down. As we're going to see, religion can go down deeper, but we can see it. Rituals, we can see if I had a friend that was in India, and they were telling me all the colors. They were just telling me that, in my travels, I've seen the rituals, as I'm sure most of you. So if you think about a holiday that you've been on, that's the 10%. The emotional level is a bit lower. However, now when we start going below the iceberg, the emotional level gets a little bit higher. So just at the waterline, this is the unspoken rules. We can see some of them, but they're most easily seen, but they're a little bit deeper. The emotional level is higher. These are the conversation patterns. This is where we talk about personal space or concepts of time. These are the beliefs, the ideal. These are the things that affect us they're from our culture, they're from our values, they're from our beliefs that dictate how we act. And then we're going to go to the bottom of the waterline. And Hall said, this is what he calls the hidden culture. This is the culture that's deep rooted. These are the habits that people have, the assumptions, the understandings, the values, the judgments that we know, but we can't articulate them. So sometimes we can say to somebody, but why do you do that? Why? And they might just say, I don't know. That's just how it is. That's how it always is. It's the embedded. It's the deep feelings. It's that emotional level is very high. I like to call this where it's the deal breaker. This is of who we are. So when we look at this cultural iceberg a little bit further in terms of the concept of culture with this model, we can see if we look at the bottom of, you look at the bottom of the iceberg, I call this the beliefs. This is the deep rootedness. This is the things that are of the most importance for a culture. And from that beliefs, as you move up the iceberg, you have your values. The beliefs dictate your values. And from your values, they dictate your actions. So a lot of times from what we see. So the beliefs, they go to the values and then the actions, and then those are the parts that we see. And if you notice on this slide, this is interesting because it has all of these different words. These words are what we call the cultural identifiers. These are the specific qualities that identify a culture. So a concept of beauty, what one culture might find beautiful, another culture might not see the beauty in that. Notions of what a leader is it what does a leader look like? Is it sort of a patriarch, or is it a matriarch society? Even how people use their voice, attitudes towards elders, you know, the whole idea of what we think about elders, marriage rituals, concept of time, body language, you know, the whole notion of eye contact, all of these little cultural identifiers, which are the actions that we do, they are made up from our beliefs and our values. And again, I just like to say that this goes down to the deep rootedness at the very basis. Those are the things that are most important. And then that's our beliefs and our values, which is dictated to our actions. Cultural identifiers, these are the characteristics that establish the identity of a group or a culture. These are the characteristics of a culture. So, you know, if you walk in and you see a collection of samosas and curry, you might think Indian. If you go to another culture and you see pierogies and cabbage rolls, you might think Polish or Ukrainian. So even from food, something is one identifier as food can identify about our culture. Now, this is really important. Each person, all of us, we each have our own cultural iceberg. Each of us see the world from our own set of cultural identifiers. Each of us have our own set of beliefs. Each of us have our own set of values, and each of us, of how we portray ourselves, that is part of our cultural identity. And as a culture, we have our own identity as well. So being in Canada, we have a cultural identity that's very specific to Canada. And I always say, you know, even if you looked on the Government of Canada website, there is a whole write-up of, you know, what's acceptable in Canada, what are the actions. It talks about all of the cultural identifiers. So if there's a newcomer that comes to Canada, it's very laid out on the Government of Canada website. So it talks about, you know, personal space, you know, what it's like. The idea of coughing, of when you would cough, and it would talk about things like spitting are not acceptable. So it gets quite detailed. So these whole cultural identifiers and these are very, very important. So each of us have our own cultural identifier. We see the world from our own, we see the world from the eyes of that. So if we take a look at here, so by not being open to other cultures, this can cause misunderstanding. So this is where misunderstanding. So each of us have our own cultural identity. And if we work, like we talked about that, I showed you the slides of all the different cultures that we have. So if you go to work and you might be working with 3 or 4 or 5 different cultures. And you might have you might look at one cultural identifier, and each person could have a different viewpoint of what that's about. And different viewpoints, so each person comes from their own cultural identifier, they think they're right. I'm right about that because that's your belief system. So if you get into a place where everybody is not open, but everybody, of course, is going to judge and see the world from their own culture. But when this happens, this is where you can get some misunderstanding by not being, and this is where going from judging to understanding, this is what's going to help cause cultural competence. So our cultural assumptions can actually lead us to wrong conclusions. I'll give you an example. When I was working, I was in Equatorial Guinea, and I was contracted. I was hired by an oil company to come in because they were having some problems. They had a large multicultural workforce, but there was some problems that were happening. There was some misunderstandings, and they thought it was cultural. So I went in, and part of what we did as my team when we went in is we divided. We just wanted to talk to the different cultures to get their perceptions. And I can remember going in and talking to this one man, and he was sitting there. He's an American guy. He was a supervisor. And he says, I try to build this team. I want this team. I'm trying to get everybody together. But sometimes I'm talking to people and it's like they aren't even paying attention. It's like they don't even care. They don't even listen. And you could tell he really cared. He wanted to do well. In the meantime, we had another meeting with another group. And it was like, so what is your perception of what's going on? I really like my job, says this one guy, but I'm not sure. I don't think my supervisor, when I talk to him, when he talks to me, it's like he keeps getting louder. And I said, well, what are you doing? Well, I'm listening. I said, tell me about your body. What are you doing with your body? And he goes, well, I'm standing there and I have my head down and I'm looking at my feet. And I said, and why do you put your head down and look at your feet? Because that's a sign of respect. And I really respect him and I like him. So in the long story short, we went back and we were meeting with this man. And I said, so what exactly was it that caused you, that you were upset about what was happening? He goes, well, his head was down. And then I went on to explain to him. And I said, in his culture, by having his head down is the utmost respect. That says, I really like you as a boss. And he just sat back in his chair. He threw his arms up and he says, and here I thought he didn't like me. So here was one cultural identifier, which was eyesight, the whole idea of eye contact, that caused this big misunderstanding. Now, that's just one. So if we can have the courage, I guess, and the openness to looking at other cultures, talking to other cultures, trying to understand other cultures, so that these assumptions, because sometimes these assumptions, they can lead us to wrong conclusions, but finding out what are the facts. So this misunderstanding can have an impact on cultural communication, so the way that we communicate. And there are another story, and here's another one that I'll just give you a quick one. This one is when I was in Chad, Africa. When I was in there, the first day I was there, we would talk and everybody was going. I had no idea what they meant. I thought maybe they were harassing me. I thought maybe they didn't like what I was doing. So finally, I just stopped and I said, I'm not sure, but what is that clicking that you're making? Oh, they said, oh, it means yes. Now, that's fine. And that was great because I learned that. But having worked with Indian students here at the university in Edmonton, we were talking, I was telling them that story and they started laughing. And I said, what? They said, in India, that means no. So again, one little sound, one little identifier in one culture means something else. So if you have one person saying yes and one person saying no, you could have a misunderstanding if you invited somebody out for dinner and they didn't show up. So there's the consequence that happens. So this misunderstanding can have an impact on intercultural communication. So I'd like to just do a little bit of self-reflection here. And we're going to do a poll right away. So specific to the culture that you identify with or your cultural heritage, I want you to think back. So what are your views about personal space? We're going to look at 4 cultural identifiers: ways of greeting each other, your concept of time, and relationship to the elders. And I think, Olga, you're on this for the poll. So we're going to do a poll. So what best describes your personal space comfort? Now let's take the pandemic out of the picture here. So if we didn't have a pandemic, what best describes your personal space comfort? So if you could just go on the poll. Okay. All right, so what we see here is 1 meter. That's about 70%. Now, that is really interesting because in Canada, that is what the comfort zone is. It's 1 meter. And if you even look on the website in Canada I was talking about, they say it's about 1 arm length away. So that is the personal comfort zone of Canada. Now, half a meter or less than half a meter. Now, the people that said that, I'm wondering, you may have come from a different cultural background. Perhaps you are maybe from a different culture, or you grew up where, so that might affect it. Now, what I wanted to do here is I wanted to put different numbers down. So a half a meter, that is the very acceptable. That's a very acceptable space if you are in other countries. So if you are in Mexico, I believe, Olga, it's close. And if you go into some of the, in India, if you go into some of the African countries, you will find that people's personal space is a lot less. So when people talk to you, if we're from Canada, you might say they were in my face because they're invading your personal space. There are some cultures, or there are some people that are older that like people to stand a little bit further away with age, so that 2 meters or more than 2 meters becomes more of an acceptable point in there. But the thing is, with this poll, depending on what culture or what your cultural iceberg is, everybody's correct. But it's just that the majority is 1 meter. And I would probably think that that's Canada. The Canadian cultural iceberg has the cultural identity of personal space is about 1 meter. Thank you. All right, let's go to the next one. What best, okay, why isn't that working? Okay, what best describes your way of greeting outside of work with friends and family? So this is outside of work, because sometimes work is different than if it's outside of work.
Debbie, meanwhile they finish completing this poll, they're requesting us to share the link of the Government of Canada that outlines the cultural identifiers, so we can, when we send the slides.
Okay. I can find the link and give it to you, Olga.
Thank you, Debbie.
Okay, I think we're done the poll. All right. So if we look here, we see a hug and a handshake. Again, one of the common ways in Canada where people, once they know each other and they're familiar with them, it's a hug. People will hug each other in Canada. Even if you don't know them, you'll say, this is my friend who has come to visit me. You'll say, oh, welcome. And we will often give them a hug. Sometimes it's a handshake, but there's that whole idea and of touching. Kiss on the cheek. This is we do that, but I think we'll find more in French part of Canada and Quebec. That's more of a common thing, is the kiss on both cheeks, which is the part of the French culture. Also, touching the feet. I would think that maybe we have some people of that are East Indian that are listening here today, as where touching the feet is a very big sign of respect, and none of the above. Now, I'm just wondering, Olga, if the none of the above, can you just write in the chat how you what you do when you greet people outside? Would you mind just typing a couple things how you greet each other? I'm just interested. And if Olga, you could just share that.
My personal, how I greet people.
Yeah, it says that some people have said none of the above. I'm just wondering if those people in the chat.
Some people say bumping on the fist because that's COVID, I guess. Some
Yeah.
say hello and wave.
Yeah.
Some people eye contact and wave or shake. We wave, rarely touch each other. Reasons of COVID right now. Yes, I agree. Waving their hands. Some people say verbal, so it varies, like hello, hi.
Right. So there's that whole idea of the acknowledgement using our hands in terms of how we greet each other. And a lot of it, again, is the touching, the fist bump, the high fives. It's the touching. All right. So thank you. Another little story here, just for when I was not culturally aware. I was just a young teacher, and I was driving this beautiful young Indian gal that was part of my class. The school asked me if I could just drive her back and forth from where she was staying on this exchange. So I did that. And then for about a month, and then she was going home, and her parents said that they would come to my house. They wanted to see me. I said, oh, please come over. And they walked in, and I knew nothing. And all of a sudden they walked in, and they were older than me, and they were going down to touch my feet. And I can remember thinking, because from my viewpoint of my culture, it's like my feet are dirty. They aren't clean. But from that, there was this big motion. It's like, well, why? And then they explained to me what it meant. So all of this learning, everything that we do, all these times that things are different around us, if we ask the questions and we ask to understand why, we are becoming culturally competent. So at that moment, when I was young, I was learning something about the Indian culture. So everybody that we meet that have different cultural icebergs than we ourselves, if we're open to discussing or talking, we are on the road to becoming culturally competent. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, let's go to the next one. Why isn't it letting me go? All right. What best describes your concept of time? All right. So again, when we look at the poll, 49% say at least 10 minutes early, 10 are right on, 7% right on time. That is the culture of Canada. Canada, we say we need to get there on time. We need to be there 10 minutes early. And it's because Canada, we are in time, we are monochronic. Monochronic means we are very structured. We're very linear. You know, we have set times, we set our alarms, we have meetings. When we're done in 15 minutes, we're done. Things are done in chunks of time. It's about getting the job done. So we're very linear. On the other hand, there are some cultures that take all the time that you need. And those cultures are what we call polychronic. Those are the ones that they're flexible. It's based on relationships. It's about getting the job done, but through relationships. If you need to do it over a meeting, if it's a dinner meeting and it goes for 3 hours, you're getting the job done. It's flexible. Sometimes it's referred to as island time, but it's relationship based. And so you're getting the job done, but you're getting it done in a different way. And then you have right at the exact time. Then there are some cultures where you are, 10 minutes late, it's no big deal. I had one student that was an international student, and they shared with me this story that they let me go. And I said, well, why? He said, well, I kept coming about 20 minutes late, and because I kept missing my bus. And I said, well, and I'm thinking monochronic, like set your clock, half an hour, catch an earlier bus. But that was part of the cultural. It's like back home, 10 minutes late, it's no big deal. So he said, and I just have to work on it. So there's that, and that's part of it too, is understanding the difference. So if we can understand the difference, if we're from a different culture, then we have to try to adjust to fit into the way the culture works. So this is just to show you that different cultures have different cultural identifiers, and there's no right or wrong. It's just what it is of the culture. And as we're watching through these polls, we really see the Canadian culture, of course, is really coming through. Okay, let's do one more. Okay, this is relationship with family elders. All right.
Debbie, some people say none of the above. Can you tell us more about it if your answer is not there?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, if you could just write what it is. All right, so as we look at these, they have the wisdom of the years, and they always get advice from them first. So whenever there's a decision to be made, they go straight to the elders. So that's the relationship. So there's the wisdom. The next one is family elders are expected to live with me. They took care of me. Now it's my turn to take care of them. And family elders live on their own, and I support them. So if we take a look at this in terms of cultural identifiers, family, again, in Canada, I'm going to start with Canada each time. In Canada, it's not the expectation, but it's acceptable that, and it's the way that a lot of times our parents or our elders, when they get older, they might move out of their home and move into a smaller apartment, or maybe move into a senior's residence that gives them their food and they have other people around, or extended care, and we support them. And again, I just want to say there's no right or wrong. It's just how the cultures goes. And then there's family elders are expected to live with me, and I took care of them, and now it's my turn. They took care of me, now it's my turn. There are many cultures in the world where this is where the fact is. It's that when a family elder gets old, that they live with you. That's until, and you take care of them. And there are many cultures. I'm thinking when I was doing another cultural, this one was with people from South America. I think it was in what country? It was in Rio de Janeiro. I think that's where they were from. And they were telling me, we were talking about this, and the one guy turned to his friend and he said, "Do we even have any place where our parents can go live?" And his friend said, "Maybe one." So there are some cultures where it's not even in their radar that this is what would happen. It's just that I will take care of them. Often a young fellow that when I was traveling, he was from the Philippine Islands. He said he was with his dad. He says, "Yeah, and I'm going to get a good job so I can take care of my parents when they're older." So that's just that. And now, and this is where some misunderstandings can happen. You know, you could go to a culture, somebody might come over here and say, "What? You don't have your parents live with you?" So they're judging. And we might go somewhere and think, "Your parents live with you all the time?" So once we get out of our own cultural iceberg, and because we are always working from our beliefs and our values, this is where judgment can happen. But just knowing, you know, even in this poll, that there are different people are coming from different cultures, different cultural icebergs, but just understanding that different cultures work differently, and just even understanding that will bring about cultural competency. Olga, what were some of the comments that were said?
They're really interesting because there's a lot of response on them. But it, like, first of all, is none of the above, and say specific to elders. I too would say none of the above. Need the option. Elders will live independently until they can not longer do so. Then we would help them move into a support facility. And another person says, Susan says, there is a minimal relationship, time spent together on holidays with intermittent visits in between. Lynn says, I respect them and care for them in some ways. Jamie says, perhaps baby boomers have set aside for retirement and it's harder for younger generations to support. Sylvia Costo says, where I come from, it's still a big taboo to put elders in residence or homes. Selena says, I often question my elders as they have left a legacy of intergenerational trauma and hold racist values, but I still believe it is my duty to support them when they cannot support themselves. And Vanessa says, it depends on the position of who is supposed to support the elder. They may be working full time still and unable to be there to take care of them. So they support them being in a home. I really don't think it's one way or the other. It's what works best for each situation. And I agree. So what you were saying, like, there's no right or wrong. It's just,
Yeah.
It depends on the person, the situation, the culture, the background, everything.
Yeah, and this is one cultural identifier, one. You know, so if we take a look at the whole cultural iceberg, you know, there is so much at play here. So there's no right or wrong. And a lot of times the way that we deal with the different cultural identifiers, it comes from who we are, our beliefs and our values. Even though we are living in Canada, we still have those beliefs and values that if our parents were immigrants that are instilled into us as well that can play here. But and generally saying with Canada, it's the family elders live on their own and I support them. And I think a lot of what you said, Olga, sort of goes along with that. We support them until we can, you know, we visit them. So there's that whole idea of support and getting the advice from them. But on the other hand, there are cultures that they live in the same home their whole life. You know, they have multi-family homes and they have a system that works for them in their culture. All right. Okay, so thank you very much for that. I'll just take this off. So the whole idea here is that when we take a look at the iceberg model, to remember that each of us have our own cultural iceberg. This cultural iceberg is who we are, it's our beliefs, it's our values, and these determine our cultural identifiers, which in turn become our actions. So cultural competency, it's the ability to look beyond our cultural iceberg and acknowledge the difference of others. So that's the key there. So cultural competency is that whole idea of moving from judging to understanding, being open to look at other people's culture, other people, the way they live, how they do things, their beliefs, their values, discuss, talk, you know, invite them out, go to different festivals to learn about what their culture is about. And the more that you can learn about other cultures is the more culturally competent that you will become. All right, I'm just quickly, we don't have much time, we have 20 minutes. I would like to just talk about the Lewis model. The Lewis model is interesting because in this terms of globalization of the world in the business, and especially in the last 5 decades, we've had this whole idea of cultural differences that have become vitally important to leaders and managers and executives around the world. So Richard Lewis, what he did is he created a model. He studied and visited 135 countries, and he worked in more than 20. He said that humans are divided into 3 types and 3 typologies. And he said that these categories are based on behavior. So the purpose has always been to help clients know culture, starting with their own, so like the iceberg theory, Lewis, like the iceberg model, Lewis also said that we always have to start by understanding ourselves. So he said by using this model, then he'd use it practically for better global business and understanding. So Lewis, when he did this, it really was in mind for business, in working environment, but we can also apply it to our everyday as well. So he said, Lewis model said it's divided into 3 categories. And again, this is important. It's based on behavior, not on religion, not on cultures. It's based on the behavior of people. So what he did is he created this model and he divided it into 3 sections: multi-active, linear active, and reactive. And he said that in linear active, which is the blue, these are the people that plan, they schedule, they organize, they pursue action change, they do one thing it's all about getting the work done. But then on the other hand, you have the multi-active, this is the red. These are the talkative people. It's all about relationships. It's based on people first, doing many things, planning, priorities, not according to, there's no time schedule it's not about time schedule, not according to, it's about the importance that each appointment brings. So again, it's about people. Linear active is more about getting the work done. Then you have reactive. Those are the people, the cultures that prioritize. It's about courtesy, respect, listening quietly and calmly, reacting carefully to the other side's proposals. These are the cultures that sit back. They take things, or these are the behaviors, sorry. These are the behaviors of the people that take it in, they listen, they evaluate before they speak. So where would you place, so if you look in this, there's linear active, multi-active, and reactive. Just think to yourself, where would you place yourself on this model? Are you more linear active, more multi-active, or are you reactive? Or you could be a hybrid of both, which means you have a little bit of both of them. So if you just take a look at it, and where do you think Canada would fit? All right, I'm just gonna, so if you look here, what he's done is he has actually made a model of where he has put different countries according to behavior. So if you notice, Canada is at the bottom. Canada is between linear active and reactive. So Canada is a hybrid. So Canada has some qualities of both of them. Olga, who's here, Olga's from Mexico. Olga is multi-active. Would you agree, Olga?
Very red.
Red. And so, working with other people with the behaviors. So we have people that are, all of you, like, I'm not sure. And of course you have to, part of this is you have to reflect back to yourself. So I'm going to use myself as an example. I'm Canadian. I was born and raised in Canada. However, my parents were immigrants and my parents were from Eastern Europe. I have worked for an American company. I have worked in the Middle East and much of Africa. I've taught students from China in the international university department at university. So from my experiences, I probably would put myself somewhere in the middle. So depending on your experiences or your training, I work with a lot of students that are from India. And a lot of my students from India, they're engineers or accountants. Engineering and accounting, they have very linear active behaviors. So from their experience, now they're living in Canada, so life's experiences, our training, where we've traveled in the world, the people that we've met, we can place ourselves somewhere on here to sort of help from the self-evaluation again of where you think you might fit. He also said, Lewis also said that a good manager probably would be somewhere in the middle. A good manager would probably have to be able to understand the behaviors of the different parts of the triangle. So this is, and I just always like to say that this is a generalization again that he has done from this. But if you take a look at it, if you think about yourself, where would you place yourself from your own life experience? Where would you place yourself? So he created this because he said this would be really good in helping people when it comes to hiring people at work. But he also did this. This is what the world looks like in terms of the Lewis model in color. So we have all this from Mexico down here. So Mexico's red, multi-active. South America, much of the world is multi-active. It's a hybrid of the reactive. So much of the world is like that. We have Asia, which is very reactive, with sitting back, then judging. Then we have, parts of Europe, Eastern Europe, that are the multi-active and quite organized. And then you have Canada right here, huge. We are a hybrid of reactive and linear active, and then the States linear active. So here's what Lewis said. Lewis said that if we can understand this, that if we are working in a business or in a work environment, and we can understand the behaviors of people that are working with us or alongside of us, then we are going to have a better understanding of getting along, of working, of that cultural competency, of building that cultural competency. So again, going from that judging to learning, to understanding, to becoming culturally competent. So if you think about, people that are, I always say, newcomers that are coming to Canada or different countries from over the world, so you have people coming from different countries, say multi-active parts of, maybe, or the Middle East, that are coming to Canada. There's the whole different set of behaviors that they aren't used to. So people will act out of their behaviors that they're used to. And if it's different, then it becomes frightening. And something as little, when I was teaching literacy to some of the newcomers, something as little as taking the bus, that was new to them. They didn't know how to work the bus. And it was, even how to get the bus, how to communicate about the bus, how to even go to the bank. So for them, part of it, they didn't know the behavior to do until somebody could teach them and tell them about it. And then this was their way of becoming culturally competent within a new community. And it was by understanding. And it's the courage of people to say, hey, can I help you? You know, what can I help you with? Or, you know, to do something. Even one of my students right now, she's lovely. She's from Africa. And she was the whole thing. She says, I haven't gone much because I can't figure out the bus system. So we talked about ways and strategies that we could do this. So with Lewis, he said that this is really important because these different behaviors of, and which he put into the different cultures, he said will have an impact on how we do business and how we deal with each other. And if we can understand the differences, then we can understand how we can, what we need to do to bring about understanding, to bring about cultural competency. So in this next one, oh, sorry. Anyway, it's the same question. What identifiers from the Iceberg model or the cultural behaviors from the Lewis model may contribute to misunderstandings in our workplace, daily routines, and in our communities? So is there, you know, if, you know, maybe in the chat box, we don't have a lot of time here, but maybe, you know, we talked about a lot of them, what identifiers or what cultural behaviors, you know, multicultural behaviors, you know, or not, you know, sitting back if you're from the reactive, that can cause, that may contribute. It says, please comment in the chat box. I'm not sure if anybody wants to put, maybe we could take 1 or 2 or 3, Olga.
Yes, so far I think everybody's typing.
Okay.
Yeah, but as soon as there's something, I'll let you know.
Yeah. And then
what you mentioned before is that she has changed, and that's part of that adaptation and that, you know, belonging into the new culture and becoming more cultural competent in the center with more colors.
Yes. And then once we take a little bit, we'll just take a couple of them, and then I just will, I'll just talk a little bit about how we can create a culturally competent organization, and then we're done.
So Sophia says that one's idea of time. And yes, we experience it a lot with international students. When they come late to class, and they say, no, I was only 2 minutes late. And then we say, 2 minutes, it's late.
Yeah.
That is late. So yeah, that's a big struggle for sure. And I was thinking another example about our students, Debbie, like learning how to dress for the weather.
Yes.
Buying the proper shoes, buying the proper jackets, and wearing layers and all that stuff, because it's a struggle. And then to the other topic that we have is the culture shock, right?
Yeah.
Stages of it. Greg says, nodding can signify I hear you, but not necessarily signify agreement.
Right.
That sense, Greg, like, you know, like Mexicans say yes, but Indians do this. And for Mexicans, that means no. Yeah.
Yeah.
Irina says the vibrancy of conversation involvement. Maureen says time is a big one. Calling elders by first name, body language, hand signals. Yeah, we always talk about money. How do you say money Canadian, Debbie? How do you say money with the Canadian hand? It's this, right?
Yeah.
And Mexicans is pack a bill.
The whole idea of hand gestures, the whole idea of body language, you know, communication by what we say, it's very, very different from around the world. Okay, I'm just going to.
The last one, just let me read the last one. This is from Badila Francisca. Ideas of child rearing. My daughter said I should speak in another language with my child until he learns some English words. Of course, I didn't follow her advice.
And that's the whole, and that if we look at that cultural iceberg, the whole idea of child rearing, that's deep down in the cultural iceberg. That goes down to your beliefs and your values. And that's cultural of what we do. All right, thank you very much. So the goal is to understand that with knowledge and discernment, we can move from judging to understanding. That's the goal, to become culturally competent. So how do we bridge the gap to cultural competency? Well, we've looked at two ways, through the Iceberg Model and the Lewis Model. And part of that is that understanding of self, understanding our cultural iceberg, understanding our behaviors. And once we understand that, being open to welcome, to look, to discuss, to learn about, to put yourself, to try all the different foods, to experience other people's cultural icebergs and the way that they behave. These are the ways that are going to help you to bring you to cultural understanding. But organizations can do it as well as a whole. And I just want to we just have about 4 minutes. I'll just do this quickly. There are 4 steps. There is an article that's written from the Community Toolbooks, Building Culturally Competent Organizations. And what they said is there are 4 steps to do this. First, it's your cultural knowledge, your cultural awareness, cultural sensitivity, and cultural competence. And I'm just going to sum this up right here. So the cultural knowledge, this is getting to know the person. So if you are in a company, you sit down, you talk to them, you have lunch with them, just through conversations in your company, you get to know this. But cultural awareness, this goes beyond, this goes to management. This is where management may say, we're going to have a day or a half a day where we're going to sit down together and we're going to all learn about the same thing on the same page about cultural awareness. So there might be some cultural awareness training where people are learning about, other people's culture. So at the end, they're learning, you're helping them to go from that judging to understanding, because a lot of times a company will bring in cultural awareness trainers like I did for the oil company, is because there's some conflict that's happening. And a lot of times it goes back to the culture part of it. Then once we have this cultural sensitivity, I'm just going to, so understanding others' groups and being open. Then we have the cultural sensitivity. So that's knowing the difference between the cultures, but not assigning values or differences. So once we have come through this training, we are not now going to say that's right or that's wrong, or because we've learned, we're going to be a little bit more culturally sensitive. Sometimes it's not easy, but what it does is it makes people mindful, and people can now get the job done because that's what they were hired to do. And so a company has hired somebody to bring about, to help them to work, to get along. And the goal of that is cultural competence. So this brings together all the stages. You have operational effectiveness, and now it has the capacity to bring into systems of different behaviors, different attitudes, people with policies, and they work more effectively in this very cross-cultural setting. And the key here, as I always say to people, then people really like going to work. They aren't going home at night and saying, I really don't like it because people don't really understand me. Because now they like going to work. They like doing their job. That is in a nutshell of how you can bring cultural competence to an organization. And to close, again, cultural competency, being open, really does improve our intercultural communication skills, how we communicate with each other through our body language, through verbal, through nonverbal, from our day-to-day, from our work, and how we get along. So from that, going from that judging to understanding improves our intercultural communication skills. Thank you.